All right, I've got 4 o'clock, so let's go ahead and call the meeting to order of the February 3rd, 2022 Capital Funding Protection Committee. Can we please have a roll call? Yes, ma'am.
Paul Anderson. Elise Bunkowski. Here. Charlene Bybee.
Here.
Sophia Cardinal.
Here.
Thank you. Oscar Delgado. Andrew Diss.
Here.
Jean Herman.
Here.
Justin Ivory.
Here.
Bob Lucy. Devin Reese.
Here.
And Dave Solaro.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, we've got a quorum, so we will move on to item 2.01, approval of the minutes for the December 2nd, 2021 meeting of the Capital Funding Protection Committee. Just want to double check, do we have any public comment on this item, since it is an action item?
We have no public comment at all.
All right, thank you very much. With that, I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Got a motion by Reese, second by Diss. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Hearing none, passes unanimously. Moving on to item 2.02, which is information and discussion on the anticipated cadence and workflow for the future meetings of the Capital Funding Protection Committee for 2021-2022 school year. Mr. Searcy.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Adam Searcy for the record, Chief of Facilities for the school district. This is our standing item for information only, really just to help keep the committee apprised of what direction we're going for upcoming meetings and stay in touch with what we're planning. So just to dive right in, we omit this evening's meeting and look ahead to our next regularly scheduled meeting in April. We look to have several items at that time for possible action. We'll likely adjourn this, or pardon me, gavel in this committee as the oversight panel for school facilities. You may or may not know you have dual membership in that committee. It's legally required committee for the school district that is obligated to provide a biennial update to the state regarding the status of school facilities and funding of that nature. So we'll look forward to a positive letter for your review and hopefully concurrence. We'll send that off to the state in accordance with that NRS. Then we'll likely adjourn and gavel in a separate agenda with your Capital Funding Protection Committee hats on. And we'll talk in more substance at that time about the external audit. Since our last meeting, have not been able to get together in a meaningful way with Member Ivory and Member Cardinal. I have had some success investigating past audit work through our chief internal auditor, as well as productive meeting with our past audit consultant. We have a meeting scheduled for about 2 weeks from now with all of us, including Mr. Ivory and Ms. Cardinal and other folks. And our intention is to have a scope developed and proposed to the committee in April for an external audit. So I don't have those details, but our intention is to bring something back well developed and for possible action to the committee. Also in April, we will be presenting our updated FY23 to FY27 5-year CIP. This will be a pretty substantial presentation as far as information is concerned. As many of you likely recall or are familiar with from your own agencies, the actual authority, if you will, associated with the 5-year CIP is somewhat limited. It's a very important document as far as indicating our future plans, but as always, we'll reiterate all of those projects individually actually have to come back for approval. So we'll go into quite a bit of depth talking about what the future years are anticipated to hold. This is for action, or is it anticipated to be presented for action to then go to our board for action, which is required that it roll into the school district's budget and be submitted to the state. So that's what April's shaping up to look like. June, we will have sort of our fiscal year annual approvals likely in front of the committee. So last year, in number 2 there, the capital renewal plan looks to be very, very similar and familiar in size and format to what you've seen in past years. This is our approximately $40 million annual program of projects, roofs, boilers, et cetera, that we'll go through in detail and agendize for action. Last year, for the first time, item 1 here, we presented a similar but separate approval for IT device refresh program. So separate money, separate program from the capital renewal plan, but for the first time, we were able to develop a device refresh program specific to technology items. We're anticipating some good lessons learned and a healthy update there, whereas the capital renewal plan is a little more well practiced. I'm looking forward to being able to come back to the committee with some updates, what worked, what didn't, what we learned, and of course an opportunity to continue that annual investment into our technology devices in our schools. And then lastly, I do anticipate looking for some action from you on a couple of projects associated with the 5-year CIP to give us budgetary authority to move forward immediately in FY23 with a couple of the projects. They'll be more modest in scale, so we're not talking about a $125 million construction allocation. We're talking perhaps some preliminary design funding on the $1 to $2 million scale. But we'll introduce that in April and look for action possibly in June on that. August, we're leaning towards not needing, so I'm going to keep it on there, keep it on your calendars, but we are definitely excited to celebrate the likely opening of 3 school facilities in that time period, and if we can at all avoid it, just go ahead and delete 1 meeting off your busy calendars and enjoy some ribbon cuttings. That's all we have slated for August at this time. If we do skip August, in October we'll have to do our annual committee member introductions, elections, general business. But as a part of our 5-year CIP in April, we'll introduce our proposed facility master plan study. We'll talk about that more in April, but basically anticipating hiring an external consultant to evaluate our current and forecasted facility needs and revenue resources, and engaging with the community extensively throughout the fall and winter of 2022, and making recommendations as to what might go into future CIPs along those lines. So very excited about it. The details are still coming into focus, but looking this far out ahead, I anticipate bringing something of an update to the committee in October, possibly something for action in December, more likely an update in December. Ultimately, I see that coming to the committee multiple times and then for approval to the board as well. So that's, again, we're just telegraphing the direction we're going months in advance. In December, then, of course, we've got the placeholder for our annual accountability report. So just trying to look into the future. That takes us through the end of 2022. And, boy, if we nail this, we're doing pretty good for the predicting the future standpoint. Any questions or discussion on that one?
Any questions? No? All right. Thank you, Mr. Searcy. With that, we'll go ahead and move on to 2.03, which is a presentation and discussion on the current project schedule and budget costs associated with the future Debbie Smith Career and Technical Education Academy High School. So I'll turn that over to Ms. Zimmerman.
Thank you and good afternoon. My name is Tammy Zimmerman. I'm the Deputy Chief Facilities Management Officer for the school district. And here to present an update for asking for funding for Debbie Smith Career Technical Academy High School. So an overview, I know I went through this back in December, but it's talking about utilizing the existing campus on Sutro that HUD currently has. It's a 950 student CTE high school. It's got some existing buildings that will remain, some that will be demoed. And a new building is proposed in the middle of the campus here. And with that, we're going to talk about some demo. We're going to demo approximately 62,000 square feet of buildings. We're going to renovate. And I say renovate, not remodel, because it's pretty extensive. We're going to renovate 126,000 square feet of building up there. And the new building is scheduled to be about 108,000 square feet, right in the middle of campus. And also redo the parking so that it's more conducive to the use of the space up there, as well as having our new boardroom up here. So hopefully in August of 2024, we won't meet here anymore. We'll get to meet in the new boardroom up there. So that'll be nice. There will be the 6 academies that CTE has identified up there: marketing, culinary, vet tech, horticulture, construction tech. Hope to grow our own so that we can have them in our department. Biomed and nursing, manufacturing, and teacher training with kindergarten through 5 as the focus for that. We're going to go through this. That's kind of the background. Nice little rendering that VWB did for us. This is the front of the school, front entrance here. We're going to talk about our fixtures, furnishings, fixtures, and equipment. We call that FF&E. And the budget for that, we'll get further down into it. Construction professional services budget, and we'll go into detail with that, and then the construction phase budget for it as well. So design schedule. This is the design schedule that we started with. I'm pretty proud that we've been able to stick to that design schedule without any major hiccups or anything. So June of 2021, we finished schematic design. October of 2021, we finished the design development. And then we started refining in December and construction documents, and we'll be done and ready to submit 2 permits. We're going to do a demo permit, which gets us going, demoing buildings and off and running in June, and then also at the same time submit a building permit. We had a really good meeting with the City of Reno last week with City of Reno Building and Fire. They're going to keep the permit inside so they don't send it out, which would be a huge benefit. So we really want to thank them for that, and specifically Dan Burkle in the building department, because that's a huge benefit. And then we'll dive into furnishings, fixtures, and equipment. So this is, if you take a building, turn it upside down, shake it, everything that falls out is FF&E. We provide all of that in the district, and we actually have it installed with some vendors, but we also have staff that installs it as well. So the budget will include all new FF&E for the facility. We were talking about plasma cutters, tables, desks, chairs, nursing beds, all the K through 5 equipment for students in there. We will be supplementing the existing kitchen with new kitchen equipment with that, and mixers, spoons, all of those things. The detailed budget was submitted in that packet for you. I went with the plan room by room. We have done existing buildings that are typical of classrooms and spaces, so we put an estimate to that we've spent in the past. And you can see that it's detailed in there, that comes up with a total of $8 million. The budget also includes staff time, inventory and install of vendors. I took all of what we had spent as FF&E at the existing buildings that we've opened, right? We have Desert Skies, Sky Ranch, and Marcy Hers, and I put on there the date that those were contracted, so to give you guys some context. We know things have risen in price, so it kind of shows you that. But those 3, Desert Skies, Sky Ranch, and Marcy Hers, are the actual of what we've spent, including staff time. And then took the square footage that was there, that's in those buildings, and divided it. So it gives me an FF&E per square foot. So I'm trying to show you kind of a comparison of where we're sitting. O'Brien, you'll see those are budget, that's a budget number that we provided. We haven't finished spending that money, so I just put the budget number in there to give you context. Proctor Hug is the same thing, it's a budget number. And even this $8 million is a budget number. And then putting in the square footage of what we will be furnishing shows you that we're about $34.12 per square foot, which, if you think about a CTE facility with the expensive equipment that they use, feel pretty good about that number, and we're right in there with what we've spent in other schools as well. So that's a brief overview of that FF&E. Construction and professional services. Washoe County School District staff augmentation. We have a senior staff member that'll be point person on this project, but we need somebody who's on the boots on the grounds and looking at the project daily to do that. So we augment staff with a construction manager to do that. They provide documentation review, dailies. They deal with the special inspection, making sure that we're getting the inspections where we should, schedule and invoice review, and documenting the project and formally documenting it so that we have that in our back pocket. It also includes third-party special inspections for soils, geotech. They come in and check all those things for us and make sure that we're matching the specs, and they provide recommendations if they find something that is abnormal. And those are required by the jurisdictions. We also do special inspection for steel connections and all of those, and we would be contracting for those services with a special inspection firm. We also do within that construction professional service building system commissioning, and with this being a combination of new building and old building, we need them to be in checking to make sure all those systems that are existing turn on, as well as the new systems, and that they all work together. So that's very important for us to have, and it's required by IEC Energy Code to do that. We also have in here Washoe County staff. We talked about some field verification, right? We're gonna have a senior project manager that'll be out there. They'll be in their weekly meetings and making sure that all of that happens and is on schedule and everybody's working well together on the site. We also have prevailing wage. This will be bid, so it will be a prevailing wage job, and we need verification of that. And we have a district staff person that goes out and checks to make sure that that's all in line and does reporting on it for us, as well as the apprenticeship program that's required by law. So same thing with staff and staff augmentation, showing you where we sat on the previous buildings that we've done. Desert Skies, Sky Ranch, Marcy Hers, existing buildings that we've completed. Those are actual funds spent, and those are the actual construction costs that we had. And then when you get to O'Brien, Proctor Hug, and Debbie Smith, those are budget items. We haven't finished them, so same logic as before with the FF&E. You can see that we started at 3.5% and kind of rose a little bit. And so we feel like we are in a good spot with 4.45% on that, and keeping that in line with what we've done on others to make sure we have a good product for the school district. Construction budget overview. This project is intended to be delivered with one GMP. That's one contract to our CMAR contractor, Q&D. We've gone through and we've talked about it. We've had continuous and collaborative design efforts. Q&D and the design team is part of that. We have a local design team who understands our needs, has done several buildings throughout the area and some for us, and we have a great relationship with them. We do, when we build and design a building, we always learn something. We always have lessons learned, and we put those things that we learn into the new building and either correct them or change them to meet the needs and make sure that it's what we have as standards in our building. Really have a great partnership with our construction manager at risk, Q&D. We talk daily by email. We have meetings with them. They're very proactive with design solutions in that. And again, we've had a quality partnership with them. They've done a constructability review for us that is in that whole packet of, I think it's 250 pages. It's all in there. They've also had many partners that have worked on our previous schools, contributing information into this design effort, estimates specific for them. We've also done an independent cost survey. O'Connor Construction Management Incorporation did an estimate at 100% DD. We reconciled those between Q&D and O'Connor. They were pretty darn close, and then we did it again at 50% CDs, and we are within less than 0.5% of each other, which was really good to see that they saw the same things on the documents for us. So very, very close. And you can see those. OCMI's estimate is in that packet if you want to read 250 pages. I'm not going to go over all of it for you. And then we get to the construction budget comparison phase. Just to kind of give you a comparison of where we're at asking for construction cost of Desert Skies. That's the actual construction cost again with the square footage, and that's the price per square foot. And if you move your way down to Debbie Smith, we're budgeting $112 million just for construction. I want to explain in that budget there has owner contingency. We've increased the owner contingency a little bit in this from our typical 2 to 2.5%. It's about 3.2% because we are going to see some unknowns when we open up in those old buildings. And so that's our owner contingency, but we've increased it a little bit just because of our, for our comfort and getting into those old systems and old buildings. But you can see that we're looking at about $477 per square foot, which is comparable to O'Brien, but I also want to remind you that this is a CTE facility. I have much more electrical situations in there. We have exhaust for the fume hoods, a lot more power requirements in the nursing and the construction. So it's going to be a more robust middle school type setting. It's about the same square footage as the high school. If you go back, right, it's not too small from the high school. It's bigger than the middle schools. So feel like that is a pretty good cost per square foot. I also want to tell you that we bought Rio Wrangler recently for $450 per square foot as an elementary school that doesn't have the same needs that the CTE high school has. So this is the construction phase budget that we presented to you guys in December as information. Just want to kind of remind you of what that was. You can see where I've compared all of those for you, FF&E, professional services, and construction costs with all of our others. And now I'm going to have Lance Semenko, the president of Q&D. He's got a couple slides up here to explain to you the cost increases and what we're going to see for that.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lance Semenko. I'm the president of Q&D Construction. So as Tammy was saying, you know, this job, excuse me, is a existing facility, but one of the biggest things that's driving the cost moving forward is something that's occurring all over our country right now, which is inflation. From this slide, you can see from the DD to the CD, 50% CDs, it's gone up over 1% already. And we're not seeing that slow down, but I think eventually we're going to see that. And with some of these other slides, we can kind of talk through how we're combating some of this. So a lot of the issues that we're having for additional costs are coming through these three, basically these three trades. And we're seeing this all over every job we're doing. Actually, some of these trades we've seen year over year 30 to 40% in the last 2 to 3 years, which is crazy. We've actually got a good partnership with some of these guys that, like Tammy said, we've brought them on board. We've asked them to value engineer. We've asked them to help cost this thing. So these guys are going to help us get this thing and keep this thing within the budget that we're talking about. So through the design process, bringing it up to the construction documents, the budget update, as you can see, it's kind of small, but with, you know, the additional subcontractor and supplier input, we've gone through some value engineering, which is measured on this project. They can tell you exactly how many dollars were value engineered out of it, increases and decreases. As the drawings get a little more detailed, there's some grading that we had to change, which brought some retaining walls that weren't in the original design. But you can see, I mean, like the sidewalks, there was 150,000 value engineered out of that. The fences and gates went up a little bit, but then the retaining walls went up a bunch. That's because of how the design progressed through with the grading changes and whatnot. And then the last thing, here's the four major drivers on the project other than inflation. Like I said, the retaining walls, that's a matter of grading and whatnot. The drainage, storm drainage, that thing sits on the side of the hill, goes downhill. there's plenty of storm drainage that's going to be needed on that thing, so there's not an effect like what's happened on a couple other places in town. And then the additional mechanical equipment and the casework and the countertops. So if you guys have any questions for me, feel free.
Thanks, Mr. Semenko. We talked a lot about the different components that could see some escalation. What about wages? Do you feel confident that you and the subs are going to have enough labor force, and are we going to have to be paying these guys more? I mean, I know at our business we're having to jack up wages just to retain people because we're having a hard time keeping folks. Are you guys experiencing similar situation?
So the good part is this is a prevailing wage project, so the wages are already set. So we don't have to worry about that.
It's easy. Thank you.
So knock on wood.
Mr. Semenko, I want to thank you. Really, I don't have a question, but I just want to say, you know, this committee takes very seriously the charge which we have, which is to safeguard the dollars that come into this community through the WC1 process. And in choosing, you know, a contractor of your caliber, I think we've made a good choice. So I want to say thank you for the efforts that you do undertake. And quite frankly, it's sort of a thanks to your late founder and understanding what this community means both to your company and all of us makes it very easy for us to continue to engage in this process. Obviously, some of this stuff is simply out of our control, right? But the CMAR process has allowed us to find a contractor who is working with us, right, rather than against us. And I think that certainly that bodes well because of our past experience, but it also tells us and helps us to inform our future experiences together. And obviously we have lots of schools to build in the coming years. So I thank you again for the work you're doing. I thank your team. It's not an easy time to be in the industry that you're in, and so that you continue to be open and transparent with us and with the committee, I think is very good. So thank you for that. Appreciate your time and effort.
Thank you. And I also want to give a shout out to the two guys that are here with me, David Evans and Devin Harrell. Without them, this wouldn't be where it's at today. So.
I always like you to thank the other people. You never really take credit, so I appreciate that as well.
Thank you.
So with that, here is the final construction phase budget. I want to make sure that the committee knows that this will be competitively bid out. This is a budget number. This means that hopefully those bids come in under and we can award that GMP and all those services under this amount. We have provided contingency in there so that we have covered enough of it and covered the unexpected that may or may not come. And with that, I'll take any questions you might have.
Any questions? Go
ahead. Excuse me. Thank you. A couple quick questions as you go back towards the beginning, and we were talking about the charts that have the FF&E. Question for FF&E and the staff cost. Hug High School is so much higher than the Debbie Smith, the 53.33 per square foot. Are we back on the
Yep.
FF&E? And I kind of am thinking that, you know, in my mind, that the CTE school, that the Debbie Smith Academy would have higher FF&E because it's not just regular classrooms. So I was curious on Hug, why that number was so much higher, and the staff number of how much staff was dedicated to it. What is the difference with Hug that's driving the costs so much higher? And I know a high school is going to be higher than the middle school for sure.
So that is a budgeted number. That's not what we've spent. And when we did the same exercise, but we haven't built a high school, and they have different furniture than obviously an elementary and even a middle school. So that was based off of some estimates that we had with our FF&E school specialties and that, and our staff going through. And we hadn't built it. We hadn't put in a lot of those rooms that they may have. So it's an estimate from us. We could definitely, we will definitely come back and give you what we actually spent when we get there. But that was the original budgeted item based off of just going room to room and estimating some of those rooms because we've never furnished them before or because they're new.
I guess too, as I look at it, the actual square footage of the new Proctor Hut compared to the Debbie Smith is what, about 50,000 square feet. So that kind of accounts for the difference in cost is the sheer size of it. And you're putting in obviously different FF&E than you're going to be doing at the Debbie Smith.
There is different FF&E at Debbie Smith versus Proctor Hut. We don't have. We have a gym already. We have some of those things. We're not having the full gamut of sports, which wouldn't require the full gamut of those pieces of equipment. So that could be part of the difference. We also don't have music at Debbie Smith, right? And music instruments are pretty expensive at the high school. So there are some differences in the rooms that we have compared to the high school and the square footage.
Okay, appreciate that. I was just curious. It wasn't questioning that was the cost, but I just saw the big differential. And thank you for explaining that.
Go ahead.
Hi, Justin Ivory for the record. Okay, so let's dig into the office staff and the augmentation. I know we've got a $5 million figure there. And when I was looking through the 250-page spreadsheet, they were still combined together. So I'm kind of curious if we used to break out like Norm's time and our staff time from the other. How much is our construction manager, not our construction manager at risk, but our construction manager budget on this project?
So right now we've estimated it at about $2 million, $2.5 million. It'd be split between our staff and construction manager staff.
Okay, and I noticed you had mentioned kind of like what the construction manager provides, and they do document review, which is obviously they go through all the plans and specs, make sure that Q&D is building what they're supposed to be building. Daily reports, do they oversee Q&D's daily report, or do they provide their own daily report?
They provide their own daily report. They are an augmentation of us as the owner out there providing us that daily report and information on what happens every day so that we can go back and check those dailies.
Okay, and then my next question, maybe I can ask Mr. Semenko. Do you guys provide a daily report?
Yes.
Do you turn that daily report into the school district?
I'd have to ask and find that out because I honestly don't know that question. But every foreman that we have fills out his own daily report.
Okay, maybe Ms. Zimmerman knows. Do they hand in their daily report to you?
I will have to check because I don't know that they hand it in daily or if it comes in with their invoicing so that we can then check that.
Gotcha. But at some point they turn in their daily report.
And they marry up, and that's when we see the differences in something that. This is going to be a big site with a lot of work going at once, and even having a couple people with boots on the ground is going to be hard to cover all that with a demo, a remodel, and a new construction. And they get to keep the rest of the site functioning with irrigation and mowing and all of that too. So it's a big site to keep and make sure that everybody knows what everybody's doing and is coordinated.
Okay, so let's go maybe to the next item. You mentioned they do inspection. Do they schedule the inspections, or do they just oversee the inspection?
They just make sure that the inspections happen, right, at the right time, and it's in the schedule. It's talked about in their weekly meetings, so we know who's coming out and that they actually come out when they're supposed to, and that gets done.
Gotcha. And Mr. Semenko, do you guys book all the special inspections and the city or county or whatever it happens to be?
Yes.
Okay. And then we also get a report from the special inspector?
Correct.
Yes.
That gets turned in?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they work for us as the owner of the special inspection. We pay them.
Yes. Yep, exactly. Separate from the contract so that there's no conflict of interest. Yep.
Correct.
That makes sense. Okay, and then my only other question would be on the FF&Es. Do we include computers for all the students in that school?
So that school will be the same as what we've done with the previous ones. There will be a computer for every student at that school.
Okay, and we've done this in all the past schools that we've built in the last 5 years?
Correct.
Is that correct? So
we do projection, right? We get a projection because we have to order them ahead of time.
Yep.
And we do that projection plus 15% for breakage because they do break or don't start up. But we do provide one for every projected student plus 15%.
Okay, and just to be clear, so I'm understanding that, in our renewal program, these also are going to go into our new renewal, but are they considered in our existing renewal plan? I might need to bring Adam up for that. I'm not sure. Do you understand what I'm saying? That we have that the IT renewal plan that we put together, and what I'm wondering is, are these computers that we're buying for all the new schools? Because we're doing 1/5 every year, right? So I'm wondering at what point are we renewing these computers, or are they part of the 1/5 that we're buying every year?
They're not part of the 1/5 we're buying every year.
So
these come out of our FF&E budget for this project.
So I guess what I'm asking then is, when we do the first 5 years, I guess, is a 5-year program? Is that what it is? So when we do the first 5 years, all we're doing is buying computers for all the old schools. And then once we hit the end of that 5th year, so probably somewhere in the 3rd year, we're also going to be needing to buy extra computers for the computers that were purchased during the FF&Es. Is that, am I seeing that ahead far enough, I guess?
You are. Let me try and answer this a different way. This is Adam Searcy, just for the record. Again, we're with the construction of a new school, or in this same logic in this case, we're going to be providing all of the FF&E new on day one, and whether it's a new roof or new computers, it goes into our asset inventory with an associated anticipated lifespan, and then that asset inventory is what is considered when developing the refresh program. So these computers will go into our inventory. They'll be at the back of the line because they're the newest, and so we have a inventory of all of the school district's computer assets, and each year are evaluating their condition and age and developing a replacement program for those computers most in need. And then as these newest computers sort of work their way up on that priority list, they'll eventually be refreshed through that process.
Okay, and so I'm clear. So then we can expect here probably in year 2, year 3, that the number is going to have to, every year is going to have to grow. I mean, when we're talking about, as a rough guess, what are we talking about here? 2,000 computers? 1,500 computers? 1,000 computers?
Well, they're capped at 950 students, so that
Okay.
plus, and depending on what is really projected for enrollment that first year too, right?
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I guess I know I'm getting way off topic here for this, but I'm just kind of putting it in my head because we're going to have that renewal program coming up, that TI renewal program coming up. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Herman, do you have any questions? Could be.
No, I don't.
All right, thank you. I do have a question. Looking at the schedule, understanding we're going to do one GMP with this. Part of what we try to do is mitigate risk moving forward. This question, and maybe it's getting too deep into the weeds on kind of contractual process for this, but with 27 months between, kind of bid and opening, that's an awful lot of risk for the general contractor, the construction manager at risk, and all the subs to take related to potential escalating prices of materials and all of those other sorts of things. So are there any provisions that you're looking at within the contract? Because it can go both ways. It could be a detriment to the contractor and the subcontractors, or it could be a windfall to the contractors and the subcontractors bidding something so far in advance where we've got to deal with these things. I'm just curious if there's any provisions to help us as a board mitigate the risk and help actually, I know why we do a construction manager at risk, but help mitigate some of the risk there where potentially, that is evened out in the playing field. I just curious if there's any escalation clauses or de-escalation or anything along those lines associated with this, because we're in a period of time where we really don't know whether it's going to continue going up or whether it's going to flatten off, and someone hedging their bets early. I'm just curious if that's a thought by either the contractor or the school district.
So it is a thought. We have started that conversation with Q&D to see what, if any, in those documents changes and has that language for it. We haven't gotten far enough down the road to actually finish that conversation, but it is a thought because, right, we have 27 months, and this price it does have escalation included in that for some of that, but we are actively talking about that with our contract documents with Q&D.
All right, thanks. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation. So with that, we'll move on to item 2.04, which is the presentation, discussion, and possible action to recommend approval of $125 million to the 2021-2022 C Major Projects Program, and potentially forward recommendation to the Board of Trustees for approval at a future meeting. Mr. Searcy.
Okay, thanks again. Adam Searcy for the record. This is our standard format. Always important, I think, for the record to go through this. I made a couple of minor revisions to the format. I think for clarity, want to point out up above. Historically, these have all been combined. I separated now the annual programs from the major projects, the individual projects. Didn't add anything, just a formatting adjustment. I think it better describes these annual programs. When we look at this total allocation number for the capital renewal program, that represents now 5 years, I believe, of cumulative allocations each year. We don't typically display the actual committed values because they are spread out over so many different accounts on the hundreds of projects that this $192 million have been budgeted for. Similar with the technology device refresh program, as I mentioned earlier, that's only in its first year of existence, so we have cleaner numbers there, but I felt like it was more appropriate to speak about them just sort of in a separate category. Nevertheless, noting that this entire list of projects and programs were identified in 2016 on the ballot measure, known as WC1, with the exception of just a couple of additions that have been asterisked, that have been added by the committee and the board since that time. So that's kind of the lay of the land. We've got 3 columns here, starting with the purple, the total allocated. Those are the totals for each project, so oftentimes including all of the design phase expenditures, or budgets rather, all of the construction phase budgets for each of these projects, some of which are still in progress, and the red check marks intended to indicate projects that have been fully budgeted for. And then the gold column on the right, the total amount committed to date. This is as of January 19th. We had our team pull these updated numbers to let you know where we stand on the total amount expended against these projects to date. Again, with green check marks indicating those that have been fully completed. And as you can see, for example, Swope, O'Brien, and Wild Creek, while nearly entirely committed, those projects still have costs coming in as we near the finish line for them. So specific to the action on this item, the repurposing of the existing Hug High School, now known as the Debbie Smith CTE Academy. As you heard in the presentation before, a total construction phase funding recommendation of $125.0 million brings our total potential allocation with the approval of this item to $138.75. That's in millions. And this red check mark was added for this month to represent that should this be approved, this is intended to represent the total budget necessary to complete this project in its entirety, as you heard described earlier tonight. This $10 million was also updated to fully describe the amount that's been expended really through the design phase through January 19th. So I think that's it. I'll take any questions on this table if you'd like. Otherwise, the action is for this full construction phase funding of the Debbie Smith Academy as indicated here. Thank you.
Member Bybee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment as I look at all of these green check marks on the right of completed projects. I just want to thank you and everyone who's been working on these, because we are under what was allocated on every single one of them. And some are close, but some, you know, you guys have just done an incredible job working with our contractors, working with the team that put these together to see them all under what we allocated, I think is important, because I think the confidence that our voters gave us when they passed WC1 was for us to be fiscally responsible, and I think you've done that, and then our job here is to oversee that, and I just, it's a good thing that you can sit and look at this, and we can say that we truly worked hard to get the best bang for our buck and to be cognizant of those tax dollars that we're spending, and we're doing it responsibly. So just want to thank you and your team for a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Member Reese.
Thank you. I have a few questions that are about the major projects identified in the second full section here. Am I to read this to understand that for long-range planning purposes, the goal or the plan is the construction of the Cold Springs Area High School, the Butler Ranch Area High School, and then I don't understand the strategic purchase of Sparks High School properties. I imagine that has something to do with a desire to build a larger or rebuild Sparks High School at some point in time. So I'm just trying to get more of a, not so much a drill down into the budgetary numbers, but the vision that is created by the existence of these sort of budgetary line items.
No, I appreciate the opportunity to discuss this a little bit. Specific to those line items and even the exact verbiage, we've been very intentional to maintain consistency and fidelity with that language. This is literally what was on the ballot in 2016. The Cold Springs Area High School, for example, is still very much anticipated, and we'll hear more about that in the 5-year CIP to specifically relieve North Valley's high school later in this decade. South McCarran, Butler Ranch area, again, literally the verbiage that was used in the 2016 ballot measure. Relatively little planning has been completed to date. We do have an agreement with the developers of the Daybreak Talus Valley development. They've master planned a elementary school site and a future high school site into their development. So it's longer out into the future than the Cold Springs area need, but that's what that represents. The strategic purchase of the high school, Sparks High School properties, again, something that was identified even pre-WC1 when they were doing master planning to try to optimize our resources and even develop the ballot measure itself. If you're familiar with that area of town, there's really a couple of blocks of residential properties that would really allow for some strategic expansion of that campus. We've actually acquired only one of those properties since WC1 passed, not for lack of soliciting. So the school district owns one of those properties. It is something that's remains on here. I don't know if it will be a long-term strategic objective. I think I mentioned earlier that facilities master plan study that we hope to embark on later in 2022 might revisit some of these concepts that are now 5 and 7 years old and see if they're still worth pursuing. But the reason that they're on this spreadsheet the way they are is if for no other reason than to just demonstrate to the public that this is what we were charged with executing, and we're not adding or subtracting from that list of projects from WC1 without, asterisks and explicitly identifying that.
Well, and for the benefit of the committee, part of the reason why I ask is because when, as a city council member, I meet with the folks who are developing Stonegate, for example, in this Cold Springs area, Talus Valley in that part of Reno, and they identify on maps areas where they are master planning for high schools and elementary schools. I don't focus on it as much because I know that those are agreements that they would reach with the school district, but it is important sort of from my standpoint as a city council member to think about the way in which the growth affects the school district. I think it's a comprehensive way of viewing our interrelatedness, although we are separate. So that's why I ask about those specifically. As it relates to the improvement program and how you've identified it, though, it also identifies $0 allocated to those things. And then if I look at the bottom, and here's where the question lies, the major project totals, I think this is represented as, $1 billion at the bottom. And we've spent 746, or we've allocated. So am I to take that to mean that we have the difference between those two things, which is therefore available to fill in the zeros up above if that's what ultimately is decided to be done with it? I mean, is that how I read the chart in total? Is that what I'm supposed to read it as?
So yes and no. I'm glad you mentioned Stonegate. I should clarify that Cold Springs Area High School, many meetings between school district staff and those developers, very similar to Talus Valley. And I think both of those are great examples of good public infrastructure master planning partnerships with private development. Looking forward to seeing those come to fruition when the time is right. But the planning before anything goes into final design or construction has already been conducted. So I feel very good about where we're at there. The numbers, the subtotals, the total amount allocated really is when we come to you for action, you authorize a budget. Then there's work to be done on the part of the school district business team to actually, sell bonds or determine the exact color of money that will be used to fill that budget with. And the committed column is really only our encumbered, committed contracts and expenses within the budgets that have already been authorized for use. So when it says 0 in the purple column, for example, Cold Springs Area High School, we can't go and spend any of that delta between, 1,000 million and 746 million without first coming back to this committee and having budget toward that project authorized. The difference between, what's been allocated and what's been committed is either projects that have come in under budget or projects, the majority of that delta is what's on the table for action here tonight. I'm showing, the full allocation in the purple column for Debbie Smith, but only showing the current encumbrance or the current commitment. So that's 125 million of that delta right there.
Well, and of course, there is a larger political issue that is beyond the, motion or the agenda item, which has to do with what happens when that delta is reached, right? And that's why when I look at this, I'm trying to think ahead to a period of time where we have spent the allocated funds at the, billion, 23 million level, and we haven't done all the projects we wanted to do, because we will get to that moment, and then the question becomes, does WC1 sunset? How would it continue going forward? And again, I think the chart is instructive and it helps me to understand a lot of things, but you have to be thinking about it in totality rather than, each individual line item, if I may be so bold. So thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Member Dis.
So, Mr. Searcy, I like how you broke up the allocated and committed. The only thing that I would ask for going forward at our future meetings is if we add a bottom line that reflects the total amount in sales tax that's been collected through WC1, so we can see how big that pot of money actually is. Because there's still a difference between what we've approved, and sales tax projections, by my understanding, are still very robust, and we got a lot of money coming into that fund. So if you could add that, it would just be helpful to understand the bigger picture.
Will do. I think we'll have a good opportunity in April when we talk about the 5-year CIP to talk in a little bit more detail about our expected revenue forecasts, and available resources there should shed some light on this. You're right, revenues remain very strong, both in property tax revenues, which come to this capital program, and WC1 revenues, and will provide us opportunities to add to that total allocation column if and when we're prepared to make that recommendation. Right? If we have a need, we'll make the recommendation based in part not only on the need, but on the available resources in terms of funding.
All right, not seeing any more comments. Is there any public comment on this item?
We have no public comment.
All right, thank you very much. With that, not seeing any more comments, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll move to accept the report as submitted. I mean, is that the motion you're looking for?
I think the motion is actually to take action for recommending approval of this program to
So
the
I'll
Board of
move
Trustees.
to recommend the approval of the program as submitted.
I second. Sophia Cardinal.
Do we need to state the amount?
I think it might be helpful. Sorry, I think it might be helpful if we just state the amount just to make sure, but just to clarify.
In the total amount of $746,488,000.
I think we want the 125.
So in the amount of 125.
Seconder, all right with that?
I second.
All right, so we've got a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, item passes unanimously. That'll take us on to item 3.01, which is public comment. Is there any public comment?
There is no public comment.
All right, thank you. 3.02, so our next meeting will be April 7th, 2022. And with that, we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting.